A new era of Central Michigan football is upon us as Coach Drinkall will be coaching his first ever game against San Jose State. What a time for Central Michigan, especially because that means Jim McElwain is no longer the head coach. But for anyone listening, you probably know a little bit about Coach Drinkall, but for anyone that isn't, Coach Drinkall, he's from Army, obviously had a great year last year. Obviously, Army's been very, very good overall. He did mention, though, that he will not be running the triple option, which I know a lot of people listening to this is probably pretty excited about. No shot at Army whatsoever, but it's not the most exciting offense to watch. But they're trying to be more of a power spread formation type offense, which really is what the Ravens like to do. And I think that really just represents what kind of offense Coach Jim Chapin wants to have. He wants to have a balanced offense, but he also really wants it all to start with physical play. And I think that's exactly what he's trying to do at Central Michigan. But he's also the offensive coordinator for Eastern Washington, an FCS football program before he came over. Last 2 years, they had a top 25 offense. They do have Sean Cronin, the new defensive coordinator, which is from Army. He was a defensive line coach, so there's obviously familiarity between Cronin and Drinkall. But we have a whole new coaching staff for Central Michigan, so it's really a true kind of era, not only for coaching staff, but really this team overall, because you look at this offense for Central Michigan, they're returning 3 starters. And that's really just kind of where the transfer portal has gone, where college football has gone. And that really is because of this new coaching staff. And they did bring in 4 offensive linemen. One of their starting from last year offensive lineman is back in Brady Pachura. Sorry if I completely botched your name, but they did bring in 4 offensive line, so it's going to be a completely new offensive line look. Now, they did have starting experience, so that will definitely help them out, especially when it comes to kind of the play that Central Michigan really wants to have, is that physicality. But outside of that, you have Joe Labas returning as the quarterback. They didn't bring in transfer quarterback Angel Flores from Northern Arizona, which is an FCS program. So obviously Jim Chapin has some familiarity with him, with coaching at Eastern Washington the last couple of years. But this is really an offense that is going to look quite different outside of that, because they're losing 6 or 7 of their top wide receivers from last year. And again, that's really due to kind of the transfer portal and all that kind of stuff. And then you really look on the opposite side, kind of the matchup that Central Michigan is going to have. And they're going up against a defense that was really, really, really good at taking the ball away last year. They had 21 interceptions, and that's really going to be the key for this game, because one thing that San Jose State was really good at was whenever they turned the other team over 3 times, they were undefeated. When it was less than 3 times, they went 2-6. So this is going to be a really key part of this game. Can Central Michigan take care of the ball? Can Central Michigan have an offense that can put up points in? Last year, they did not necessarily do that, and maybe it's not the necessarily worst thing in the world that they're getting a lot of these new starters. Now, obviously, that means there's a lot of unproven pieces there. Now, obviously, having a quarterback with experience that wasn't necessarily the greatest last year, but with experience definitely will help, and having kind of new wide receivers there will definitely really help them overall. And then they do have Nahi Biggins back, so he did have some experience at the wide receiver position last year, but it's going to be a lot of new guys, and it's going to be really interesting to see what this offense can do, especially against a defense that was really, really good at taking the ball away last year. So if Central Michigan can take care of that ball, I definitely think that's going to be really helpful for a possible win in this situation, which going into this game as of right now, it's a 12.5-point favorite for San Jose State. And that's because they're really led by their head coach, which is a head coach that a lot of people are pretty familiar with. He was a head coach for Navy for a really long time. You have Ken Noimani-Lolo. He's been great at San Jose State. They're coming off of a 7-win season. They've actually won that many games the last 4 or 5 years. So this San Jose State team has been able to perform extremely well, and I think that's one of the main reasons why they're the favorite in this game. Now, they did lose their starting quarterback in Emmett Brown to the transfer portal, but Walker Emmett is going to be the guy at the quarterback position. They don't have Nick Nash anymore at the wide receiver position, but the wide receiving core has transferred from like Purdue, Arizona, Sacramento State. So there obviously has talent coming in for that wide receiver core. And I think that's going to be extremely important for the San Jose State team, especially coming off of an offense last year that wasn't very good at running the ball. They didn't do it very much last year. Now they should have a better offensive line this year, so you might see San Jose State run the ball a little bit more, but it's really going to be kind of through the air, which they've been really, really good at the last couple of years. And then you really look at what Central Michigan has going on the defensive side of the ball, and this is a little bit more experienced here, so I definitely think you're going to have Central Michigan rely more on the defense the next couple of weeks. But let's look at what they did good last year, what they're going to have to improve this year. Last year, they were really bad at forcing turnovers. That is something that obviously we know that San Jose State is really good at, so it's kind of going to be interesting to watch the turnover battle. I would fully expect, at least at this point, probably Central Michigan to lose it, but if they end up winning it, I think that's really going to help them long-term go into that. But obviously with a new offense, with a basically new offense completely, I think that's going to be really hard. I think you might see some miscues there, but not very good at forcing turnovers. Now, they were really good at getting pressure, so I think that's really going to help them out. And they're going to really be led by the main guy in the middle. They have Jordan Kowalski, probably completely botched his name as well. He's the leader of the defense, been named both on the Bronco Nagurski Award, which is the best defensive player, Dick Butkus Award, best linebacker watch list. He is going to be the guy, and he's going to be a guy that was extremely impactful last year. He's going to be a leader of this defense. He's going to be a guy that's really going to have to help this team change in defensive philosophy. And a big part of that change in defensive philosophy is just the approach this coaching staff had going into the transfer portal, just because they loaded up through the portal in the secondary with experienced players. Now, obviously, they don't have Dante Kent. They don't have Durrani McKinney anymore. But last year, they were a top 5 passing defense unit. So that wasn't necessarily a weakness last year. That was a strength, and they just continue to address that. And just that kind of change in philosophy is going to be really interesting. And it's going to be also different because they're going to include a more of an edge and hybrid spot. But at the same time, they're also losing most of their interior guys that made real big impacts last year. So while there is familiarity there, while there is more experience there, while they're probably one of the best players is right there at linebacker, there's a real question mark about this team. And I think, unfortunately, because of that and because of how good San Jose State is turning the other team over, with a head coach like Ken Nuimani-Lolo, with kind of having Walker Emmett as the starting quarterback, I think you have San Jose State winning this game. I just don't think this is going to be a game that goes right for Coach Drinkall, unfortunately. I do think that, obviously, he does get his first win. I don't really know how good the Central Michigan team is going to be. I think there's just a lot of question marks going into this game. I think we're going to kind of figure out a little bit more about this team after this week. If they can keep it close against a San Jose State team that has been pretty good the last couple of years, I think that's going to really help. But I just think there's way too much question marks. I think with Joe Labas kind of struggling last year, there's a real possibility there could be a new quarterback this year, and it's going to really take some time to obviously get acclimated to this new offense. It's going to take some time to get acclimated to those wide receivers. And obviously, fall camp does help with that. But you're going up against a San Jose State team that, while they do have some new guys there, and while they did lose some stars, they have some guys that are going to be impactful players. And they have a head coach that has been there and done it and won a lot. And I think this is just might be a little bit of a rough opening game for Central Michigan, but that doesn't mean it's something that I'm not going to believe in. I think Coach Drinkall is going to get this team to play physical football. If they do, they make it physical. I think it could be really close. But overall, my prediction is that Central Michigan will end up losing this game, and they'll start 0-1 against a pretty solid San Jose State team. And a team that has won quite a few games, and I think a team that's going to win quite a few games this year as well. But yeah, hopefully you enjoyed this preview. Obviously, it's just a preview. I'll do a recap of the game after it happens. But yeah, hopefully you enjoyed this little segment. Obviously, there's going to be a lot more of where this comes from. So if you're a big fan of any other MAC schools, big fan of either Michigan State or Michigan, definitely tune into those episodes. But going to continue that grind, and hopefully you enjoy this, and we'll see what happens between Central Michigan and San Jose State.